"Get out of my sight, you useless old man. You are ruining the party," my daughter-in-law screamed, shoving me toward the back door. It was Christmas Eve, and outside the snow was falling heavily. She didn't care that I was 68 years old. She didn't care that I was wearing a thin, worn-out flannel shirt. She only cared that I had spilled a drop of red wine on her precious carpet. My son David stood there watching, sipping his champagne, and turned his back on me. They thought I was just Frank, the broke, embarrassing father who lived in their storage room. They didn't know that the mansion they were standing in, the wine they were drinking, and the multi-million-dollar company David was about to join all belonged to me. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. Before I reveal how I taught my ungrateful son the hardest lesson of his life, take a moment to comment "Family First" below if you believe we should always honor our parents. And a quick note, this story includes dramatized elements for educational purposes. Names have been changed to protect identities. To understand why I was standing in a humiliating puddle of red wine on Christmas Eve, you have to go back 10 years. Back then, I wasn't living in a storage closet. I was living on my ranch in Texas, retired, peaceful, surrounded by memories of my late wife, Martha. I was also the silent majority shareholder of Miller Global, a real estate conglomerate, but I kept that quiet. I wanted a simple life. Then came the call. It was midnight. David was sobbing on the other end of the line. "Dad, they're going to kill me," he choked out. "I messed up. Gambling. I owe Sharks $200,000. If I don't pay by Friday, they'll break my legs. Or worse." I didn't hesitate. He was my son. But I also knew David. If I just wrote him a check, he would never learn. He would think money grew on trees. So I made a decision, a test, though I didn't know it would last a decade. I told him, "Son, I don't have that kind of cash lying around. But I'll sell the ranch. I'll sell your mother's dream house." The silence on the phone was deafening. I waited for him to say, "No, Dad, I can't let you do that." I waited for him to take responsibility. Instead, he let out a sigh of relief. "Okay, thanks, Dad. You have to hurry. Friday is the deadline." That was the first crack in my heart. I didn't actually sell the ranch. I transferred the deed to my trust fund and moved the money to cover his debt. But to David, I was now destitute. I told him I had nothing left. No home, no savings. Just my old 1990 Ford pickup truck and the clothes on my back. "I have nowhere to go, son," I told him a week later. "Well," David hesitated, and I could hear him whispering to Jessica in the background. I guess you can come live with us. But it's going to be tight, Dad. We have a lifestyle to maintain." I drove 1,000 miles to their McMansion in the suburbs. I expected a hug. I expected a "thank you for saving my life." What I got was a list of rules. Jessica met me at the door, not with a smile, but with a clipboard. "Rule number 1, she said, looking at my muddy boots with disgust. "That truck parks 2 blocks away. The homeowners association will fine us if that piece of junk is in the driveway. Rule number 2, you are here as a guest, Frank. Do not interfere with our social life. And rule number 3, you earn your keep." I looked at David. He couldn't even meet my eyes. He was looking at his shoes, ashamed of me, ashamed of the poverty he thought he had caused, but not ashamed enough to change it. "It's just for a while, Dad," he mumbled, "until you get back on your feet." I gripped the handle of my battered suitcase. "Okay," I said softly. "I understand." I walked into their house, not as a father, but as a servant. And for the next 10 years, that is exactly what I became. They didn't give me a guest room. They didn't even give me the pull-out couch in the basement. "We're turning the guest room into a yoga studio for Jessica," David explained, avoiding my gaze. "And the basement is my man cave, but there's the storage room off the laundry area. It's private." The storage room was a glorified closet. It was 6 feet by 8 feet, no window, no heating vent. The floor was cold concrete covered by a thin piece of cheap linoleum. It smelled of bleach and damp towels from the washing machine next door. My bed was an old cot from their camping trips. When I lay down, my feet touched the door. In the winter, the temperature dropped so low I could see my breath. I had to sleep in my coat. I didn't complain. not once. I wanted to see how far they would go. I kept a small black notebook under my mattress. Every insult, every cold meal, every dollar I saved them, I wrote it down. It wasn't a diary, it was a ledger. And the debt was piling up. My life fell into a routine. I woke up at 5 a.m. before they did. I started the coffee. I made David's breakfast, eggs, sunny side up, just how he liked them. I packed Jessica's lunch. When they came downstairs, I became invisible. They would eat at the dining table, scrolling through their phones. I would stand by the sink, waiting to clear their plates. "Coffee's cold, Frank," Jessica would snap, not even looking up. "I'll make a fresh pot," I'd say. "Don't bother, I'll get Starbucks." "God, can't you do anything right?" I wasn't allowed to eat with them. "It's a family time, Frank," Jessica had said early on. "It's awkward with you there." So, I ate what was left. Sometimes it was half a piece of toast. Sometimes it was the crusts of the sandwiches. On nights when they ordered expensive sushi or steak, I got a can of soup. One evening, I reached for a piece of leftover chicken on the serving platter. Jessica slapped my hand, literally slapped it. "That's for the dog, Frank. Buster needs his protein. There's some bologna in the fridge if you're hungry." I looked at Buster, their golden retriever, eating grilled chicken breast while I made a sandwich with bread that was starting to mold. I realized then that in the hierarchy of this house, the dog ranked higher than the father. If living with David and Jessica was humiliating, the visits from Jessica's parents, the Hudsons, were a nightmare. Robert and Linda Hudson were new money. They had struck it rich with a chain of car washes and acted like they were royalty. They visited every Sunday, driving a flashy Mercedes. Whenever they arrived, the protocol was strict. I was to be unseen. "Mom and Dad are coming," Jessica would warn. "Stay in your room or go to the park, just don't embarrass me." But one Sunday, it was raining hard. I couldn't go to the park. I was in the kitchen fixing a leak under the sink because David was too cheap to call a plumber when the Hudsons walked in. I was on my knees, head under the pipes. "Oh," Linda Hudson gasped, clutching her pearls. "I didn't know you hired a plumber, Jessica." I crawled out, wiping grease on a rag. "Hello, Linda, it's me, Frank." The look on her face wasn't just surprise, it was pure revulsion. "Oh, Frank," she wrinkled her nose as if she smelled something rotting. "I thought you moved to a facility." "He's still here," Jessica sighed, pouring wine for her mother. "We're too soft-hearted, I guess. He has nowhere else to go." Robert Hudson laughed, a booming, arrogant sound. "Well, at least he's useful for the dirty work, eh? Saves you $100 an hour. Hey Frank, while you're down there, check the grout. It looks filthy." David stood there, holding a tray of appetizers. He looked at me, then looked at his father-in-law. "Yeah," David forced a chuckle. "He likes keeping busy, don't you, Dad?" I stood up slowly, my knees cracked. I looked my son in the eye. "I do what needs to be done," I said quietly. "Well, hurry up," Jessica snapped. "We're trying to have a nice afternoon. The smell of old plumbing is ruining the appetite." I retreated to my closet, the sound of their laughter following me down the hall. I sat on my cot, listening to the rain pounding against the wall, and opened my black notebook. Sunday, October 14th. I wrote, "David chose laughter over loyalty. Again." You might wonder, why did I stay? Why did a billionaire endure this torture? Because I needed to be sure. I needed to be absolutely certain that there was nothing left to save. I kept hoping that one day David would wake up, that he would remember the fishing trips we took when he was a boy, that he would remember how I held him when he cried after his mother died. I was waiting for a spark of humanity. But as the years dragged on, the darkness in that house grew heavier, and the spark I was looking for was being extinguished day by miserable day. I didn't know it yet, but the worst was yet to come. The Thanksgiving that would nearly kill me was just around the corner. Thanksgiving is supposed to be a time of gratitude. In the Miller household, it was a time of performance. That year, David was trying to impress a new potential client, so the guest list was expanded. Not only the Hudsons, but also David's boss and a few colleagues were coming. The preparation started at 6 a.m. "Frank!" Jessica banged on my door. "Get up! The turkey isn't going to baste itself." I had been up since 4 a.m. actually. My chest had been hurting, a dull, heavy ache that wouldn't go away. I was 78 now. My body wasn't what it used to be. But I dragged myself out of the cot. "I need you to deep clean the guest bathroom, polish the silverware, and then stay in the kitchen to wash dishes as they come in," Jessica ordered, shoving a rag into my hand. "And for God's sake, put on something decent. You look like a hobo." "I don't have anything else, Jessica," I said, my voice raspy. "This is the only clean shirt I have." She rolled her eyes. "Fine. Then wear an apron, cover it up, and remember, you are not a guest, you are help. Do not speak unless spoken to." By 5 p.m., the house was full. The smell of roasted turkey and expensive wine filled the air. Laughter echoed from the dining room. I was behind the swinging door in the kitchen, elbow deep in soapy water. My back was screaming in pain. The ache in my chest was getting sharper, spreading down my left arm like a line of fire. Through the crack in the door, I saw them. David was at the head of the table, carving the turkey. He looked successful, handsome. He raised his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," David said, beaming, "to family, to success, and to gratitude for everything we have." "Hear, hear!" everyone cheered. Mrs. Hudson leaned over. "This turkey is divine, Jessica. You outdid yourself." "Oh, thank you, Mom," Jessica smiled, accepting the praise for the meal I had cooked. "It's a family recipe." No one mentioned me. Not one word. I wasn't just forgotten, I was erased. Suddenly, the room started to spin. The plate I was washing slipped from my soapy hands. Crash! The sound silenced the dining room. The kitchen door swung open. Jessica marched in, her face a mask of fury. "Are you serious?" she hissed, closing the door behind her so the guests wouldn't see. "That was my grandmother's china, you clumsy, useless old—" "Jessica," I gasped. I couldn't breathe. It felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest. I grabbed the counter for support, sinking to my knees. "My chest, it hurts. I think, heart." Jessica stopped. She looked at me. For a second, I saw fear in her eyes. But then, it was replaced by annoyance. "Get up, Frank. Don't be dramatic. You're just trying to get out of cleaning up." "No," I wheezed, clutching my shirt. "David, get David." David walked in a moment later. "What is going on? People are staring." "Your father is having one of his episodes." Jessica crossed her arms. "Right in the middle of dinner." David looked down at me. I reached out a trembling hand toward him. "Son, help me. Ambulance." David looked at his watch. Then he looked at the dining room door. "Dad," he whispered, his voice tight with frustration. "An ambulance is loud. The sirens will scare off the clients. It's $2,000 just for the ride. We don't have that kind of cash right now." "Please," I begged. Tears were streaming down my face. "It's probably just indigestion," David decided. He reached into the cabinet and grabbed a bottle of generic aspirin. He shook 2 pills into his hand and threw them on the floor next to me. "Take these. Go to your room. Lie down. If you're not better in an hour, we'll drive you to urgent care, okay? Just be quiet." Then he took Jessica's arm. "Come on, honey. Let's get back to the guests before they wonder where the wine is." They left me. They left me on the kitchen floor, gasping for air, staring at 2 white pills amidst the broken shards of china. I don't know how long I lay there. 10 minutes? An hour? The pain came in waves, black spots dancing in my vision. I managed to swallow the aspirin dry. I crawled, literally crawled, across the cold tile floor to my storage closet. I collapsed onto my cot, shivering uncontrollably. I realized then that I wasn't going to die, not tonight. My anger wouldn't let me. The pain in my chest was subsiding into a dull throb, but the fire in my soul was just igniting. They hadn't just been cruel. They had left me to die to save face at a dinner party. I reached under my mattress. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. I pulled out the satellite phone. The battery was low, but it was enough. I dialed. "Mr. Miller?" The voice was crisp, professional. "Sterling, my attorney, my right hand." "Sterling," I whispered, my voice sounding like gravel. "Sir? Is everything all right? Your voice." "I'm done, Sterling," I said. "The test is over. They failed." "I understand, sir." Sterling's tone shifted instantly. He knew what this meant. "Shall I send the helicopter?" "No," I said, staring at the ceiling of my prison. "Not yet." David mentioned a promotion, a merger with Apex Corp. "Yes, sir. The acquisition is in the final stages. We are acquiring his firm next week. He is slated to be the new VP of sales." I closed my eyes. "The signing party, when is it?" "Christmas Eve, sir, at his residence. It was a request from his current boss to celebrate the merger." "Perfect," I said. A cold smile touched my lips for the first time in years. "I want to be there. I want you to come. Bring the papers. And Sterling." "Yes, Mr. Chairman." "Bring the eviction notices, too." The next 2 weeks were a blur. I recovered slowly, hiding my strength. I went back to cleaning, back to cooking, back to being the invisible servant. But something had changed in me. I stopped looking at David with hope. I looked at him like a stranger. David was oblivious. He was floating on cloud 9. "I'm going to be rich, Dad," he bragged one morning over the eggs I had cooked him. "This VP job pays double. Bonus options, stock. I'm finally going to make it big." "That's good, David," I said quietly, pouring his coffee. "What will you do with all that money?" "Buy a boat," he said instantly. "Upgrade the car. Maybe get a vacation home in Aspen. Jessica wants one." "Will you pay back the money for the ranch?" I asked. He froze. He put down his fork. "Dad, don't start," he sighed. "That was 10 years ago. Besides, you're living here rent-free. Consider it even." Rent-free. I walked away without a word. I went to my notebook and wrote the final entry. December 10th. He thinks he owes me nothing. He is about to lose everything. And so, we arrive back at the beginning. Christmas Eve, the night of the party. The house was transformed. Caterers were running around. A string quartet was playing in the corner. David was wearing a tuxedo. Jessica was in a red velvet gown, dripping in jewelry she had bought on credit. I was told to stay in the closet, but at 8 p.m. I walked out. I walked right into the middle of their fantasy. I spilled the wine. Jessica screamed. David turned his back. They were about to throw me out into the snow. But then the doorbell rang. 3 sharp, authoritative knocks. The room went silent. David straightened his tie. "That's him." He whispered to Jessica. "That's Mr. Sterling, the CEO of Apex. Be nice." Jessica shoved me behind a large potted plant. "Stay there and don't breathe," she hissed. David opened the door. Standing there was Mr. Sterling, flanked by 2 massive bodyguards. He looked past David. He looked past Jessica. His eyes locked onto me, hiding in the shadows behind the fern. And the show was about to begin. The silence in the room was absolute. It wasn't just quiet. The air itself seemed to have been sucked out of the room. Mr. Sterling stood in the doorway, snow dusting the shoulders of his charcoal trench coat. He was a man who exuded power, the kind of power that made lesser men tremble. David was practically vibrating with excitement. He stepped forward, his hand extended, a desperate, eager smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Sterling," David gushed. "What an honor! Welcome to my humble home. I'm David Miller. I can't tell you how ready I am to join the Apex family." Jessica quickly stepped up beside him, shoving the spilled wine glass under a chair with her foot. "Yes, welcome. Please, come in. Can I get you some champagne? Or perhaps some caviar?" Mr. Sterling didn't move. He didn't take David's hand. He didn't even acknowledge Jessica's existence. His steel-gray eyes scanned the room, cold and calculating, until they landed on me. I was standing by the back door, wearing my faded flannel shirt, old jeans, and holding a dirty rag. I looked like a janitor who had gotten lost. Jessica noticed Sterling's gaze. She let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "Oh, I am so sorry," she said, waving her hand dismissively at me. "Please ignore him. That's just Frank. He's nobody. We were just kicking him out. He's a bit senile." She turned to me, her eyes flashing with a silent threat. "Frank, I told you to leave. Get out to the shed, now." Mr. Sterling moved, but he didn't walk toward the appetizers. He didn't walk toward David. He walked straight toward me. The heavy footsteps of his bodyguards echoed on the hardwood floor. The guests parted like the Red Sea, confused whispers rippling through the crowd. Sterling stopped 2 feet in front of me. David looked confused. "Mr. Sterling, sir, the contract is over here." Sterling ignored him. He looked me up and down, taking in my worn clothes, my tired eyes, the redness on my arm where Jessica had grabbed me. A flicker of fury crossed his face, but he composed himself instantly. Then he did the unthinkable. Mr. Sterling, the ruthless CEO known as the Shark of Wall Street, bowed. He bowed deep and low, a gesture of profound respect and submission. "Mr. Chairman," Sterling said, his voice clear and resonant in the dead silence, "I apologize for the delay. The storm made landing the helicopter difficult." "Chairman?" David's voice squeaked. "WH what?" Jessica froze, her mouth hanging open. "Chairman of what? The Neighborhood Watch?" Sterling straightened up and turned slowly to face them. His expression was one of utter disdain. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," Sterling said coldly. "Allow me to introduce you to Mr. Frank Miller, the founder, majority shareholder, and chairman of the board of Miller Global, which, as of this morning, is the parent company of Apex Corp." He paused to let the words sink in. "He is not Frank. He is the man who signs my paycheck. And he is the man who owns the company you are trying to join." David laughed. It was a hysterical, disbelief-filled sound. That's a good joke. Dad? A billionaire? Look at him. He drives a 1990 Ford. He sleeps in a closet." "And whose fault is that, David?" I spoke up. My voice wasn't raspy anymore. It was the voice I used in boardrooms. Firm, commanding, unwavering. I stepped forward. Sterling immediately stepped aside, handing me a pristine white handkerchief. I wiped my hands and tossed the dirty rag onto Jessica's expensive sofa. "Sterling," I said, "do you have the employment contract for David Miller?" "Right here, sir." Sterling opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick document bound in blue velvet. I took the contract. It was heavy. It represented David's future. A 6-figure salary, stock options, a corner office. Everything he had ever wanted. I looked at David. He was pale, sweating profusely. "Dad," he whispered, Is it true? Is it true that I founded Miller Global 40 years ago?" "Yes," I said. "Is it true that I stepped down to see if my son could make it on his own?" "Yes." I walked closer to him. "And is it true that 10 years ago, when you came to me with a gambling debt, I didn't sell the ranch because I was broke? I sold it to teach you responsibility." David's eyes widened. You had the money the whole time." "I had millions," I said. "But I wanted to see if you loved me or my wallet. And for 10 years, David, I got my answer." I held up the contract. "You let me eat scraps like a dog," I said, my voice rising. "Dad, please," David begged. "You let me sleep in a freezing closet while you bought heated seats for your car." "It was Jessica. She made the rules," David cried, pointing at his wife. "You coward," I spat. "And on Thanksgiving, when I was on the floor, clutching my chest, begging for help, you gave me aspirin because you were too cheap to call an ambulance." The guests gasped. Mrs. Hudson covered her mouth in shock. "You put a price on my life, David. $2,000. That's what a father is worth to you?" David fell to his knees. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. If I knew you were rich, I never would have—" "Stop," I shouted. "Listen to yourself. If I knew you were rich, that is exactly the problem." I looked at the contract one last time. "David Miller, as chairman of the board, I find you unfit for the position of vice president." I ripped the contract in half, then in quarters. I threw the pieces at his feet. "In fact," I continued, "I find you unfit for any position. You are fired, David, and I am blacklisting you. No company in my portfolio, which is half this city, will ever hire you." Jessica suddenly shrieked, "You can't do this. This is our house. Get out! Get out!" She lunged at me, but one of the bodyguards stepped in, blocking her path like a stone wall. I looked at Sterling. "The deed, please." Sterling tapped his tablet and projected a document onto the large TV screen on the wall. "This property," Sterling read aloud, "is owned by M Real Estate Trust, a subsidiary of Miller Global. It is designated as corporate housing for senior executives." I smiled coldly at Jessica. Since David is no longer an executive, he is no longer eligible for corporate housing. I pulled a pocket watch from my pocket, the one thing I had managed to keep hidden from them. "It is 9 p.m. I am giving you 24 hours to vacate the premises. If you are not gone by this time tomorrow, security will remove you. And Jessica?" She looked at me, trembling with rage and fear. "Since you violated the good conduct clause of the lease by abusing a guest," I pointed to myself, "you are liable for back rent. Market value for this mansion is $8,000 a month. For 10 years, that's roughly $1 million. You will be hearing from my lawyers." The party was over. The guests were fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. The Hudsons were trying to sneak out the back door, but I saw them. "Linda, Robert," I called out. They froze. "Don't worry," I said. "I won't sue you. Your daughter's bankruptcy will be punishment enough." I turned to leave. Mr. Sterling held the door open for me. The cold air rushed in, but this time it felt fresh. It felt like freedom. David crawled toward me, grabbing the hem of my pants. "Dad, please, where will we go? We have debt. We have nothing." I looked down at him. I felt sadness, yes, but I felt no guilt. "You have your truck," I said. "Oh wait, you sold that to buy the jet ski, didn't you? Well, there's always the bus." I stepped out into the snow. A long black limousine was waiting at the curb. I climbed into the warm, leather seat. As we drove away, I looked back one last time. I saw David and Jessica standing in the doorway of a house that was never really theirs, watching the only real wealth they ever had drive away. I didn't cry. I had shed enough tears in that closet. It was time to go home. I didn't stay to watch the eviction, but Sterling gave me the full report. It was, apparently, a spectacle. True to my word, at exactly 9 p.m. the next day, a team of movers arrived. They weren't there to help David and Jessica pack. They were there to reclaim corporate property. Sterling told me Jessica tried to cling to the grand piano, screaming that it was a wedding gift. Sterling gently reminded her that the piano was purchased with a company bonus check that was now being investigated for fraud. They left the mansion with 4 suitcases and a box of kitchen supplies. The Hudsons, Jessica's parents, were waiting in the driveway. Not to help them, but to retrieve the Mercedes they had co-signed for. "You picked a loser, Jessica," Robert Hudson shouted, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "I told you to marry the banker. Now look at you. Don't come crawling back to us. We have a reputation to uphold." Family values, indeed. When the money dried up, so did their love. For David, the humiliation was just beginning. He tried to apply for jobs the next Monday. He had a stellar resume, after all. But in the world of high-stakes real estate, reputation is everything. And I had made sure his reputation was mud. Sterling had sent out a memo to every major firm in the state. It was short and brutal. David Miller was terminated for gross misconduct involving elder abuse and misappropriation of company assets. David called me a week later. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message, crying, "Dad, nobody will hire me. I went to a job interview at a car dealership and the manager laughed at me. He saw the story on social media. Please, make it stop." I didn't call back. I wasn't being cruel. I was letting him experience the one thing he had never known in his life: consequences. 3 months later, the inevitable happened. David and Jessica filed for bankruptcy. The debts were astronomical. The credit card bills, the car loans, the back rent owed to my trust. They moved into a cramped two-bedroom apartment in a rough part of town. The kind of place where you hear sirens all night. The pressure was too much for their shallow marriage. Jessica, unable to live without her luxury lifestyle, left David for a divorced plastic surgeon she met at a bar. She left David with nothing but half the debt and a broken ego. My son was now alone, working the night shift at a 24-hour gas station to make ends meet. He was eating the same kind of cheap, processed food he used to force me to eat. Karma hadn't just knocked on his door, it had kicked it down. While David's world was shrinking, mine was expanding. I returned to my ranch in Texas. The moment I stepped out of the car and smelled the sagebrush and horse manure, I felt the tightness in my chest vanish. This was home. Not the cold closet. Not the silent kitchen. I didn't move into the big ranch house immediately. I spent days just walking the fence line, fixing broken posts, talking to the horses. I was healing. I realized that for 10 years I had been holding my breath, waiting for a son who didn't exist. Now I could finally exhale. But I couldn't just sit around. I had too much money and too much time. I called Sterling. I want to start a foundation, I told him. The Golden Years Initiative. I poured millions into it. The goal was simple: legal and financial aid for elderly people who were being exploited by their families. I wanted to make sure no other father had to sleep in a closet. No other mother had to beg for insulin. We opened shelters. We hired aggressive lawyers to fight for seniors' rights. It became my passion. I was busier than I had been when I was running Miller Global, but this time the work fed my soul. And then there was Sarah. I met her at a local diner 6 months after I returned. She was sitting in the corner, reading a paperback book, eating cherry pie. She looked about my age, maybe a few years younger, with silver hair tied back in a messy bun and laugh lines around her eyes. I sat at the counter. The waitress, knowing me, brought my coffee. "Rough day, Frank?" the waitress asked. "Fence trouble?" "Always fence trouble," I grumbled. Sarah looked up and smiled. "Barbed wire or wood?" "Wood," I said. "Termites." "Cedar lasts longer," she said, closing her book, "but it costs a pretty penny." We started talking. Her name was Sarah Jenkins. She was a retired librarian. She drove a rusty 2005 Chevy. She lived in a small cottage down the road. She didn't know who I was. To her, I was just Frank, the old cowboy with dirty boots. We met for coffee the next day, then dinner, then a walk by the river. She didn't ask about my bank account. She asked about my favorite books. She asked about my late wife. She listened when I talked. One night, after a month of dating, I took her to a fancy restaurant in Dallas. I wanted to treat her. When the bill came, it was expensive. I reached for my wallet. Sarah put her hand on mine. "Let's split it, Frank," she whispered. "I know ranching is tough these days. I don't want you to break the bank for me." I looked at her worried eyes. She truly thought I couldn't afford a steak dinner. I felt a lump in my throat. This was it. This was the test David had failed 1,000 times, and Sarah passed it without even knowing she was taking it. "Okay," I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. "We'll split it." I had found someone who loved Frank Miller. Not the billionaire, just the man. A year had passed since that fateful Christmas Eve. I was sitting on the porch of my ranch house with Sarah, watching the Texas sunset paint the sky in hues of purple and orange. We were sipping iced tea, laughing about a calf that had chased me earlier that morning. Then, a car pulled up the long dirt driveway. It wasn't a luxury sedan. It was a beat-up Honda Civic with a cracked windshield. The driver stepped out. It was David. He looked older, thinner. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by a generic store clerk uniform. He looked tired, defeated, but his eyes were different. The arrogance was gone. Sarah squeezed my hand. "Is that him?" she whispered. She knew the whole story now, and she still loved me. "Yes," I said, standing up. "Stay here." David walked up the steps slowly. He didn't rush to hug me. He stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking up, twisting a cheap baseball cap in his hands. "Hello, Dad," he said quietly. "David," I nodded. "You look different." I am, he managed a weak smile. I'm working at a hardware store now. It's honest work, hard work. He took a deep breath. I didn't come here for money, Dad, I swear. I know I'm cut off. I wanted to return this. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small framed photograph. It was old and faded. It was a picture of me, my late wife Martha, and David when he was 5 years old, sitting on a tractor. I found it in my old boxes when I was moving, David said, his voice cracking. It was the only thing I saved from the fire sale. I looked at it every night. I remembered that day. You let me steer the tractor. You told me I was your little partner. Tears streamed down his face. I forgot who I was, Dad. I forgot who we were. I let Jessica, the money, the status, I let it all rot my brain. I treated you like garbage because I hated myself. I'm so sorry. Not because I lost the inheritance, but because I lost my father. I walked down the steps. I stood in front of my son. I saw the remorse. It was real this time. He wasn't acting for an audience. He had hit rock bottom, and it had cracked him open enough to let the light back in. I believe you, I said softly. David looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Can we start over? Can I come home? I looked at him for a long time. I loved him. He was my flesh and blood. But I knew that some bridges once burned can never carry the same weight again. I forgive you, son, I said, and I meant it. The anger in my heart was gone. But, I continued, you can't come back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. David flinched, but he didn't argue. You are learning how to be a man for the first time in your life, David. If I bail you out now, if I let you back into the lap of luxury, I rob you of that lesson. You need to build your own life. You need to find your own dignity in that hardware store, not in my bank account. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You are welcome to visit, once a year, for Thanksgiving, if you bring the turkey, and if you pay for it yourself. David let out a watery laugh. He wiped his eyes. Deal, he whispered. I'll bring the turkey. He hugged me then. It was a desperate, fierce hug. He smelled of cheap detergent and sweat, but for the first time in 10 years, he smelled like my son. David drove away into the twilight. I walked back up to the porch where Sarah was waiting. She didn't say anything. She just poured me a fresh glass of tea. I looked out over my land. I thought about the billions in my trust fund. I thought about the power I held. But as I sat there, holding Sarah's hand, listening to the crickets, I realized the truth. The money hadn't saved me. It almost destroyed my family. What saved me was the truth. What saved me was the courage to walk away from people who didn't value me. To everyone listening to my story, I want to leave you with this. We live in a world that is obsessed with the surface. We judge people by their cars, their clothes, their titles. We treat the CEO like a king and the janitor like a ghost. But character is what you do when you think no one is watching. My son thought he was serving a poor old man, so he served me scraps. My employee Sterling knew I was a king, so he bowed. But Sarah? She thought I was nobody, and she treated me like everything. That is the only currency that matters. Don't wait until you lose everything to appreciate what you have. Don't wait until your parents are gone to ask them for their stories. And never ever assume that the quiet person in the corner is weak. They might just be the one writing the checks. Be kind. Not because it pays, but because it defines who you are. My name is Frank Miller. I am a billionaire, but that is the least interesting thing about me. I am a father who had to break his own heart to save his son's soul. I am a husband who found love in the winter of his life, and I am a man who finally found peace. Thank you for listening to my story. If this touched you, if it made you think about your own family, please leave a comment below. Tell me, what is the most valuable thing you own that money can't buy? I read every single one. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share more stories like this with the world. Go hug your loved ones tonight. This is Frank signing off. God bless you all.